So the alpha release of Bricks 2.0 dropped yesterday. And after watching Thomas's video, which is about an hour and a half long of the new features, I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on some of the things that I'm most interested in. Now, there's so many different features being added to this. I would recommend you check out Thomas's video because he's going to go into a lot more detail than I'm going to do. I'm going to give you more of my opinions and thoughts and some things I would like to see change before we get the final version. As always, this is not a final release, so please do not install this on a live site because you're just asking for heartache. Now, before we start, if you've got any comments about what I covered in this video, or if you test it out yourself, or you just have thoughts on Bricks 2.0, let me know in the comment section down below. Let's get that conversation started. Okay, let's just jump over now into Bricks and take a look at some of the features that I think are the most interesting. First up has to be the visual grid builder for CSS Grid. Now, if you've used Advanced Themer, this is going to be very familiar to you. There are some pros and some cons to working with this version. I still do prefer the Advanced Themer way of working. However, like I say, this is the alpha build. So I would love to see when this actually is released, maybe the opportunity or the option to be able to use either the Advanced Themer CSS Grid builder or the Bricks native, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. So how do we use it? Let me show you. I've created a very simple grid setup. We've got a section with a container and we've got 3 cards inside there. Something you're going to see on blogs, WooCommerce stores, all those kinds of good things. Let's select our grid and come over to the content section and change this from flex to grid. And once we do that, we get all the same options underneath, which if you want to manually input this information, you absolutely can do. So for example, we'll put something like 2rem in for the gap. However, you'll notice we get this new little visual grid builder icon. Click and open that up. We now get the visual grid builder. Let's take a quick look. We've got these icons at the top broken into 3 sections. The ones in the middle are the different breakpoints, so you can customize the grid based upon the breakpoint so you can control how it's going to look. I would love to see this actually display some change inside the editor to just kind of represent what it will look like on the screen. I know when we change these things over, we will see it inside here, but I just like to see the screen shrink and grow depending upon, the kind of device, just to give us that visual cue. Let's leave this back at the desktop. You've then got your undo and redo. We've also got the reset and we've got the fill grid. So if you've got spaces, this will use that option to fill the grid out and kind of cover the spaces. Then underneath, we've got the options for our columns, rows, the gap, and whether we want to use min max or whether we want to use the values that we insert, for example, FR, percentages, and so on. We'll come back to that in a moment. Then we've got the actual grid itself. So currently you can see this represents exactly what we had on screen, stacked one on top of the other. You can easily change that by changing the columns. Let's set that to like 3. You can see now we get 3 columns, one side by side. We'll get rid of these additional rows. And now we've got a 3-column grid typical to what we'd have set up and we could do ourselves. If you want to adjust this, let's say, for example, we open this up to 2, we can now use these cards and visually edit things. So let's set this to 2 columns and 3 rows. And if we come over any of these cards, we've got a couple of things we can do here. We can rename them. Then we've got these different icons. We've got the index for the DOM. We've got the edit element, which what that will do is, well, let me just demonstrate. We'll click on, let's say, this second card number here. We'll click on it. It'll take us straight back into the builder and select the card. And then we can just start changing things on that card itself. So it's a nice little sort of way of just jumping back out and finding exactly what it is you want to edit. And you've also got the reset. And like I say, we can rename these cards if we want to. For example, card 1, card 2, and so on. You get the idea. You can also see we've got these different grab handles in the corners. So now what we can do is we can visually customize the look of this. So let's just say we want to drag this down to span those 2 rows. You can see it's done exactly that. Let's change this over to maybe 3 columns. And let's say we want to move this one down here and we'll have this one expand out like so. And the same for this one. You can do it. And then when we kind of click out of this, and this is the first thing that's kind of weird, there's no sort of apply or submit or whatever button on here. So let's just click outside. It'll take us back. And you can see this now has done what we've asked it to do. So come back in and let's just reset this grid to back where it was. There we go. Change this over and let's just expand that out like so. Now we've got these FR values inside here. We can easily change this. So maybe we want to set this to be like 30%. Pop 30% in and it does it. Simple as that. Put it back to 1FR. Job done. Same thing goes for the rows. You can also, instead of using the FR values, we can use the min-max values, and you can see that now adjusts it to use min-max on both the columns and the rows. And like we see, click outside, go back, it's all set up for you. And you'll see, we take a look, everything is configured inside here using min-max values instead of the FR values. I still prefer the way it currently works in Advanced Thema, so like it'd be just great if we could actually choose which one we want to use. But for now, I think this is a good addition and something that's definitely nice to have. Now, while we're inside the builder, let's take a quick look at some of the visual changes that you've probably noticed. I'm only going to go through these quite quickly. If we take a look at the content section, it's basically exactly the same. No real changes there at all. However, if we jump into the style section, this is where we start to notice the key changes. They've updated the interface to make it a little clearer, a little bit easier to understand, grouping things together. There's new icons and so on inside here. So that's quite nice to see. And if we come over into the settings and we open up the settings section, you'll see again, there's some new options inside here. Our theme styles and page settings we've seen before. We'll jump back into those in a moment. The new font manager and icon manager, we'll take a look at those as well in a moment. And if you want to jump straight to the brick settings or the element manager, which again we will take a look at in a moment, you can do just that. So it's nice to see we don't have to jump out of the editor manually and then find the page you want to go to for the settings and so on. We can do it directly from here. Quite cool. First of all, let's take a look at the theme styles. This now has been streamlined considerably. All the same options are available pretty much, but it's been brought in line now to make it a little less sort of overwhelming with the huge amounts of different settings we have. They're still here, but they're kind of grouped together more logically. So for example, our conditions, exactly the same as we've seen before. General, same as we've seen before. Colors, you get the idea where I'm going with this. However, if we come down to the elements, this is where you're going to find all the different settings for the different elements you have enabled. And yes, you can enable and disable elements now based upon various different criteria. We'll look at that in a moment. And if we come into, for example, the section, so things are pretty much exactly the same inside here. And the same goes for all these different options. So you can still customize these, export them out, save them, those kinds of good things. Let's come back out of this. Page settings. Basically the same inside here. So you've got your general for your sort of your margins and your padding, setting your header, disabling it and so on. So all those options are fundamentally the same. Come back out of here again. Our font manager and icon manager. We'll come back to those in a moment because I want to stick with the interface changes first. Let's come back out of this. So now we jump back out to the editor itself. You'll notice that the icons at the top have several missing. For example, we no longer have the pseudo classes, but we still have access to them. It's just been made a little bit more logical. You'll notice where we can apply our classes and so on, we have this little selector option. Click and open it up, and there's your pseudo classes. We've got our hover, active, and focus as normal, and we can still add additional ones in should we want to. We've also got what's called the selector detector. I'm not going to go into detail with that. It just allows you to select various different parts of your design and immediately pull those in and create your own classes for this pseudo classes. It's just a nice visual way of being able to do this without having to go to the front end, open up the developer tools and select it from there, copy that class over, bring it back over. And it gets a bit confusing. Check out Thomas's video on that. It's quite useful. You'll also notice while we're inside here, we've also got this new option with the bricks icon. So instead of having all these little icons for the ID and classes and renaming the classes and those kinds of things, it's now grouped together under this one more logical little icon. So the same options are here. You can copy a CSS ID, you can copy a style, reset them, or rename them. So they're still there. They're just grouped together to kind of clean up the interface, which I do appreciate. Get cluttered very, very quickly. Now, speaking of the interface, let's jump over to the right-hand side, and you'll notice there's some changes here to the way this is actually displayed. Still got our visual hierarchy when you select any of these, which is still good to see. But now, instead of getting kind of colored, we get visual outlines like this. Personally, I still kind of prefer the old way of doing it. And what I do also appreciate coming from Advanced Thema, a little sort of indicators on these when you're doing things like styling at the ID level as opposed to a global class and so on. These are just little things that make life a lot easier. But there's lots more little sort of tweaks and enhancements to the interface. Again, watch Thomas's video, check out the changelog for a full, more feature-rich sort of breakdown of how all of that works. Okay, so let's just jump back into those settings and take a look at the font manager and the icon manager. Instead of going through the normal way of doing it with the settings and uploading your fonts manually, which you can technically still kind of do, the font manager streamlines that process. So if we open up the font manager, this now gives us a modal which we can manage our fonts, funnily enough. So you can do a couple of things here. You can favorite fonts, you can upload custom fonts, Google fonts, standard fonts, and Adobe fonts. Now at the moment, Google Fonts is currently disabled. So let's just come out of this, go into our settings. Inside of settings, let's come into the performance tab, and from there, let's just enable Google Fonts for a moment. Hit save settings, and we are done. Now let's come back into our font manager again. And you'll see now our Google Fonts is now populated. So inside here, we now can access those Google Fonts. So you can see, I can simply come over and I can search for a font. Let's do something like pop-ins. It's a Google font. There's 18 styles. We can favorite this if we want to, and we can download this custom font. So let's download the font. That's been downloaded. You'll see inside our custom fonts, it's now downloaded inside there. Let's clear this. So there's all of our fonts. So now if we come in to edit this, all those 18 styles have been installed. But we don't want some of those, but we can get rid of them. So you'll see we've got a bunch of italic ones. Let's say we don't want those. Delete, delete, delete. So now, if we hit save, come back out of this. Now you can see Pop-ins has 18 styles, but we're not using all those 18 styles. We're only using the ones we chose, although there are some extra ones in here that are now italic, which is kind of weird, but it is an alpha version, so there are going to be these weird kind of quirks. So you can come over, set these to normal, save that. So we now get rid of this one and this one and this one again, save. It's kind of weird, but like I say, it is an alpha version. There are going to be quirks and weird things happening. So, bear that in mind. You can then disable those Google fonts and still have access to those because we downloaded them locally, which is a good thing. Then if you want Adobe fonts, you can do that. You can also come into your custom fonts. You can add your own custom font if you want to, and then we can add them. And you can upload your own font variation, or you can import these using a JSON file. Now, when I tested this out, I didn't really get any luck with the JSON file, but again, it's an alpha version. There are going to be things that don't work correctly. Just bear in mind when you do upload your fonts, try to make sure you upload either the WAF or the WAF 2 version. Don't try to upload TTF fonts and so on, or SVG fonts. While you can do that, it's really not the best way of doing it because they'll be massive. I've got a video coming out on this, which when I release it, I will link in the description down below so you can find out the best way to work with your fonts. So that's basically the sort of font options inside Bricks 2.0. The icon manager works in fundamentally the same kind of way. If we come at the icon manager, we get the option to open up all our icons. There you can see the standard icons we have available default inside Bricks, which we can enable and disable inside Bricks itself. But you can also create your own custom grouping. So these are font icons. They're slightly different, but you can create your own icon set. So we can say WPTuts icons. Click OK, and now we can add icons into that set. So we can click the plus, and we can then find those icons on our system. So you can easily go and download a bunch of SVG icons. This is a great addition if you're working on a project and you don't want to use any of these built-in icon sets. You want to control exactly what icons are going to be used, especially if you hand this off to a client. This allowing us to create these icon groups is super useful and a nice, easy way of being able to customize exactly what's available. Now, speaking of the icon sets and enabling and disabling them, how do we do it? Super simple. Let's say you don't want to have these font awesome ones. All you need to do is select it, click. That's now disabled. The cool thing is, though, if you've used any of these icons in your design, they will still show up on the front end. So by disabling them means they're not available in the editor in Bricks itself, but if you've used them, they're still on the front end. So you can easily come in here, disable all of these, and then simply use your own custom icon set. So what would be nice here is a disable all, or an option to, instead of having to come into each single one of these and disable it, just have the option here to disable it from this grouping section. So that would be quite cool. Then when you create your own icon set, you have a couple of options here. You can rename it, you can move it, and you can delete it. So let's just get a shot of that, confirm it with the modal, and we've now removed it. So you can see it's very easy to do this, and again, like I say, quite useful, a nice little sort of quality of life enhancement. And that's kind of the takeaway with a lot of what's been added into Bricks 2.0. And a lot of people are sort of going to moan saying, oh, is this really worth a 2.0 release? Well, the reality of it is, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, Bricks currently doesn't have many holes in its feature set. You can work with dynamic data incredibly well. You can pull in various different pieces of information. You can create repeaters and those kinds of things. You can design and style everything the way that you want. It's class-based, variables, all those kinds of things are there. It just needed some polish, some additional features being brought in. But none of these things are massive game changers. They're more, like I say, quality of life enhancements. But let me have your thoughts down below. Okay, so we've seen these kind of options. Let's jump over now into the brick settings section and take a look at some of the things inside here. So this is where you're going to find a lot of the control is going to be brought in now compared to what we had before. One of the big criticisms of sort of offloading a bricks built site to a client was that they could very easily break it. And the builder access was very, very sort of limited in what you could do. However, that's been considerably ramped up now in 2.0. Let's go into the builder access section, and you'll see we still have these same options for full access, edit content, and no access. So we've still got the builder access underneath for the different sort of user roles, but we can create new capabilities. So if we click to add a new capability, and we'll just call this content editor, for example, we can drop a description in if we want to. So now we've got the capabilities and we can start to customize these. There are lots and lots and lots of capabilities here. And you can get really granular on how this is actually working. So we can choose the post types. Now you can see we've got pages, you have pages, any custom post types you create and so on will be available when you create them. So let's just say we'll enable all of these. And then you'll notice now that opens up the options, but this is not all of the options. If you start scrolling, you'll see there are lots and lots of options. So now we can really control what people can and can't do based upon their capabilities. So if you don't want to have access to breakpoints and revisions and icon manager and so on, don't check it. Don't want to give them access to templates? Don't check it. Want to allow them to access the templates to insert them? Check it, but they can't create them, they can't edit them, they can't delete them. So now they can just insert templates from the template library that you create. Then you've got your global styles and settings. Do you want to allow them to access theme styles, delete global classes? Maybe not. Maybe you wanted to allow them to just access global classes and variables, but not delete them or edit them. Set it up. Working with the components, choose what they can do from that level. You get the idea. But then we can also come into the option for elements. So you can choose whether they can edit an element or whether they can just view it. So for example, you can say they can edit it. So it requires enable access content HTML settings, blah, blah, blah. So you can choose whether they can edit the element, only edit it. So if you've created a template, for example, and you've got various different elements in there, and you want to allow them to be able to edit the contents of those elements, you can enable what elements they can edit. But if you don't want it to be able to add new elements in to a design, you can just disable that entire thing. So currently you see they can't add any new elements in. So that's pretty cool. So you can easily set this up, get control of exactly what you want, and then you can apply that where you want it. So for example, we come into view the edit content, you can see exactly what is or isn't enabled. And if you want to tweak this, you could just copy it, customize it, edit it, you get the idea. So this gives us a lot more control now over exactly what people can and can't do. And we can set up multiple different roles and capabilities to give access to various different kinds of people, our clients, you get the idea. So that in itself, if you hand off to a client, gives you real control over what you can do. Now, speaking of control, there's a lot of use cases where you don't want to have all of the different elements available inside the editor. There's going to be times, and in lots of instances, where you don't have a need for a bunch of those. Well, let's clean up the editor and get rid of the things we don't want. To do that, we've got the new elements option. Now, if you come inside here, this will show you all of the elements. We have 3 different options available for these elements. Active, hidden in the builder, or disabled. So let me just quickly go over what they are. If it's active, it's available inside the editor in the exact same way we expect it to be. If it's hidden inside the builder, it'll be active on the front end. So if you create templates and designs, and then you don't want your end user to be able to have access to this, you can hide it inside the builder, but they will still be available on the front end. Then you've got disabled. So disabled will remove it from the builder and the front end. So the code is removed, which if you have a bunch of elements you never use, kind of makes sense to clean that up and get rid of them. Always put them back if you want them, just to streamline the whole interface. So let's take a quick look at this in action. So let's say, for example, we don't want people to be able to use rich text. Let's simply go and disable that. And while we're at it, let's disable the button and images. And let's just save this. So now if we go in and create or edit a page, so if we come back into Bricks, you can see the page we created earlier on with the grid. There's a few changes here. So you'll see that the image element has been disabled globally. So it tells us inside here we can't actually edit that, use it, or do anything with it. It's been completely disabled. And if we come over to the left-hand side, you'll see it's gone from here as well. So you can't add that in. If we preview this on the front end, again, you can see that has been disabled. So it's completely removed from Bricks basically itself. Let's come back into those Elements Manager, and let's come back in and say, let's just put the image is hidden inside the builder and click Save. So now if we come back into the builder, you'll see our images are all back. But if we take a look at the left-hand side of our elements, it's still gone from there. So it's available to us in the dashboard. We can click on it and we can make changes to it, but we can't add one in. And if we come over and take a look at the front end, you can see they're all still there. So this gives us sort of more granular control over what's available in the builder, on the front end, where it's enabled, disabled, and so on. So you can very easily streamline this whole interface, get rid of things you don't want people to have access to, use that in combination with the sort of control, the access levels and things we just taken a look at, and you get a lot of control over what can and can't be done. Compare that up with components and things, and you have a lot of options. Now, the maps have got a big update, and I would recommend taking a look at Thomas's video because he goes into more detail about this. But there's a new function available, and it's a new kind of element that we need to use. But if you want to get a lot more control over pins and things like that, you can do that. So if you want to create a real estate website showing all the different properties and you want people to click on that property, dynamically add that information in, have pop-ups with information about the property details, it can all be done now with the Bricks 2.0 update. Also, you can use filters and facets on there, so you can filter that information in real time if you want to use the Ajax option. However, to do any of that, you're going to need to use one of the new functions, which if we come over to our elements and do a search for map, you've got this map connector. Now, I will be taking a look at this in more detail when we move over to having this set up as a beta release, so it's a little bit more stable. But basically, the map connector allows you to dynamically pull in information. So you can use this with ACF, Metabox, and so on. You can pull in either the longitude and latitude or addresses. You can choose what marker you want. The info box, you can create custom pop-ups. All this can be done inside the map connector. Like I say, check out Thomas's video because he goes into more detail. But this is one of those things that if you are creating real estate websites, for example, or sites that have lots of different locations for their business, this is a super cool way of being able to display this information and have it dynamically populate that information as well. So I will be taking a look at this in a lot more detail, like I said, when we move over to beta, so it's a little bit more stable. And we'll see how we can combine this with some of the other sort of masterclass videos that I've created on creating things like listings and real estate websites and so on. So that's one that I'm definitely interested in seeing how that can really open up some super cool possibilities with working with maps and locations and things like that. Now, the final feature I want to touch upon, which is something that a lot of people have been asking for quite some time, is with the form element. We're now able to work with webhooks. And if you don't know what a webhook is, it allows you to easily take the form submission and hook that into additional services, so things like your CRM. So if you ever use tools like Zapier or Public Connect or Flowmatic, those kinds of tools, you can do a lot of things with webhooks, and you can have this form connect up in various different ways to lots of different external services. It's incredibly useful. And until now, we haven't been able to do it. But we do now, or we will do when this is released. So let's choose our form. Let's come over into our actions and let's get rid of this email. Click, and now we have the option for a webhook. You'll notice once we do that, a new webhook section opens up and we can start to do things like add endpoints. An endpoint is basically, you're going to be supplied with an endpoint URL and the name, the data format, and then what data is going to be passed over to it. And then when you submit the form, that data will go via the webhook to that external service in the format that's required. So this opens up a ton of possibilities. You can have multiple endpoints inside here, so you can do a lot of things with this, and you can also still add other actions in. So if we come into our actions, we may say we want to fire off that webhook, and we want to say send an email, and we also want to redirect them after they've done it. So now we can have that webhook fire, send an email out to, for example, the admin to say something's happened, and then finally redirect them to a thank you page with information about, a video or something like that. So webhooks open up a ton of possibilities with the form element, which means that for a lot of use cases, you may only need to have the form element inside Bricks itself and not have to rely upon a third-party tool where you would have had to before if you wanted to utilize webhooks. Now, There are so many other things that are being covered in Thomas's video in the changelog. I would recommend, like I say, go back and take a look at Thomas's video because it goes into more detail. These are the things that I'm most interested in and some of the things I've had the most opinions on. Lots of the other ones are more useful but not groundbreaking. But let me have your comments down below. As always, my name's Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.